This is the Investor Connect podcast program. I'm Hall T. Martin. I'm the host of this show in which we interview angel investors, venture capital, family offices, private equity, and many other investors for early stage and growth companies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Tarek Assaad of Algebra Ventures. Derek, thank you for joining us.
Hall, it's a pleasure to be here.
So what was your background before investing in early stage companies? What did you do before this?
I actually started my career in the San Francisco Bay Area as a software developer back in the .com 1.0 times. So, I'm an engineer by training and a geek by passion, let's say. And then I transitioned. I went to business school. I went to Stanford. And then after that, transitioned into more sort of commercial roles. Did a turnaround, went back to Egypt, and I've been in the venture industry in Egypt for the past 10 years.
Great. So what excites you right now?
I think in the context of the geography that I'm focused on, which is Egypt. I'm Egyptian. I grew up in Egypt, and our fund focuses predominantly on Egypt. We do investments in the region, the Middle East region at large, but with a strong focus on Egypt. So in that context, we see a lot of interesting opportunities that focus on sort of third world problems that exist in Egypt and countries that are structurally similar to Egypt. And that's typically solutions that go after the bottom of the socioeconomic pyramid. And we strongly believe that the only way to solve some of these problems is through technology, just because it's able to scale, and the cost of service and access to service is sort of much more doable if you're using tech than if you're trying traditional methods.
Great. So what's your advice for those investing in startups in Egypt? What do you advise the investor to do before they write that check for that startup?
Every geography is different. The local context, in my opinion, is really critical. So for somebody who's interested in that market, they need to understand the local dynamics, and every country has its eccentricities, I suppose. But really, it's for us an issue of understanding the local problems very well, and then being able to understand of the solutions that have worked in other markets, what is replicable in Egypt, and how does it need to change to become a good solution, a good fit for the local problem.
Very good. So what's your advice for those running startups in Egypt? What do you advise them to do before they launch their business?
A lot of the investments that we make are things that have happened in other parts of the world. So, we see there's so many problems and inefficiencies that are being tackled by some very smart entrepreneurs. And in some sense, given that we're behind other countries, we have the benefit of, I wouldn't call it a crystal ball, but we have the benefit of being able to study well what has happened in other markets. And in many times, the US market is not very relevant because the environment is very different. But looking at countries like India or Sub-Saharan Africa for fintech, for example, or Malaysia, Brazil, there's a lot of other countries where things have done well and other things have failed. So having a good understanding of that before thinking of setting up something local, I think is very valuable. And some of the smartest entrepreneurs that we are working with have done a very thorough job.
Very good. So let's talk about the state of investing in Egypt. How is the industry evolving there, and what changes do you see coming up?
It's moving very rapidly. Like I said, I've been in this industry for some time. In the past 2 years, we've seen, by any metric that you look at, whether it's the size of funding, the quality of the entrepreneurs that are coming to of the founders that are coming to entrepreneurship, the profile of investors is attracting a lot more international capital. By any metric that you look at, this industry is really growing very significantly, and therefore that's great. But it also comes with some challenges, and we continue to be very bullish on how much impact the technology can have on daily lives of people here. Some of the startups that we are funding really are changing in a very significant way, solving problems and really contributing positively to people's lives, and that's something we're very proud of, and that's something that we see continuing. So Of course, there are some, it's still a developing market. There's still a lot of issues, and we think of ourselves as entrepreneurs because our environment is very dynamic and we're sort of figuring things out as we go along. But that's what makes it exciting for us.
So, what is your investment thesis for your fund, and what do you look for when you research a startup in order to fund it?
Broadly, like I said, we have a geographical mandate. So very broadly, again, it's technology solutions that are many times customized to solve local problems that can scale very fast. And there's a lot of inefficiencies in our markets and problems that are created specifically to address certain issues. If they're done well and if the product market fit clicks, we see tremendous growth. So, for example, we invested in a company it's a bill payment business that we exited a few years ago. By the time we sold it, it was doing more transactions on its own platform than the entire banking system did.
Wow.
So that's, it's a good example of something that gets built, tackles a real problem, and can scale very, very significantly.
Very good. Can you talk about a couple of startups that fit your thesis? You talked about one already, but who else can you talk about?
Well, we have 17 companies in the portfolio. So I'm not sure which ones. I mean, they're all phenomenal entrepreneurs trying to solve large businesses. But so instead of talking about one specific business, maybe I'll talk about some themes that we see. So, for example, logistics is something that has a lot of inefficiency in Egypt. Whether it's trucks, for example, where 97% of the trucks in Egypt are owned by fleets of 1 to 3 trucks, so very fragmented market. 2 and 3 wheelers, for example, that are used by a very large portion of the Egyptian population, particularly in rural areas, have long list of inefficiencies in how the economics for the drivers and the availability for the consumer. And so we invested in a company that's similar to Gojek. That's basically a ride-hailing company for these types of vehicles in rural areas, and we see tremendous growth in that business. So I would say logistics in general is an area where we've seen our thesis materialize and really solutions custom built for our market, going after the low end of the consumer base from a socioeconomic perspective, delivering significant value and seeing some real growth. Where the next wave that is happening is fintech, and Egypt has a very low penetration of financial services. Credit card penetration is something like 3-4%. So there's a tremendous opportunity there. And again, without technology products, it's very hard for the traditional financial services to access the majority of the consumer base. But it has to be built in ways that are significant for our market. Our technology innovations that we see are around, for example, catering for the low connectivity rates, for less expensive smartphones where users are much more worried about the hardware limitations of the phones and things like that, as opposed to some of the innovation that's happening in, let's say, in a more advanced market. So if we're really seeing that custom-built solution for our market.
Very good. So you have some great startups there. So what are the challenges you see your startups facing the most? If you had to pick one or two things that they all struggle with, what would you say that is?
Well, one is talent. The culture of working for a startup isn't, let's say, what it is in Silicon Valley. So still, if you are an executive at Vodafone and the Egyptian well-funded startup is trying to recruit you, your partner might say, hey, why are you leaving your highly paid, sort of socially well-regarded job and going to this small little local company, and are they firing you or what's going on? So there's still some of that. It's improving very quickly and significantly as companies get funded and see successes, and of course as exits start to happen and people seeing the financial and sort of non-financial reward of that. But still, it's in the making. So that's a big challenge, and we're trying to work together with our startups on finding ways to overcome these issues. The second part is is still, it's a very nascent market. So we don't have the trends, and there aren't enough data points to really be able to quickly, for example, compare valuations or compare the standards on deals and so on. Still haven't been established as much as they have in other markets.
I see. Well, what sectors and applications do you think are good opportunities for investors to pursue? You've already listed logistics as a good one. What else would you put up there with it?
I mean, fintech, I think, fintech is sort of attractive in almost every market. But, given the characteristics, some of the stuff I talked about, the low penetration of financial services, that's definitely a very large opportunity. We're excited to see the big parts of the economy, like agriculture, benefit from the innovation of tech startups. We're starting to see some of that, but still early days.
I see. Well, very good. Well, in the last few minutes that we have here, what else should we cover that we haven't?
One thing to note that I know many of your listeners are US is, there are a lot of opportunities in markets like ours. We're seeing quite a bit more interest, to be honest, from the Asian investors, particularly Chinese venture funds. So they come to the US and to Egypt and look at deals and so on. We haven't seen much interest from US-based investors, and I'd love for that to change soon. I spent the first few years of my career in the San Francisco Bay Area, and from many good friends and colleagues from living there. But I think there is an opportunity for people to look beyond, for US-based investors to look at this market maybe with a closer eye and try to assess the opportunity there.
It sounds like there's a good opportunity there, and I hope we can get the word out on what you guys are doing. It sounds like you're making great progress with these different applications. So how best for listeners to get back in touch with you?
Through the website or through our LinkedIn page. We're quite responsive usually, and there's I think you said you might be able to post that to your listeners, so very open to that.
Great. We'll put those in the show notes, and want to thank you for joining us today and hope to have you back for a follow-up soon.
Thank you, Hal. It was great talking to you, and I appreciate your taking the time to do this.
Investor Connect helps investors interested in startup funding. In this podcast series, experienced investors share their experience and advice. You can learn more at investorconnect.org. Team Martin is the director of Investor Connect, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to the education of investors for early stage funding. All opinions expressed by Hall and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Investor Connect. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for the basis of investment decisions.